Democracy means factions can take over, or a majority can be tyrannical. We've seen that in history. They saw it. They didn't want anything to do with it. They wanted republicanism. They wanted checks and power. There were certain principles, certain belief systems in the Declaration of Independence that need to be enshrined in our constitutional system. You can't have people vote away your rights. Look at the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. They're your Bill of Rights. Nobody gets to vote them out. I don't care how many people vote. If it's 90% of them don't think you should have the right to bear arms, that's too damn bad. They don't get a say in what you get, whether you have a right to bear arms and defend yourself and so forth and so on. The view of the framers, because they were geniuses. The key to the Constitution, Scalia testified to this. Joseph Story, one of the great associate justices, wrote about this, but there are two among many. Montesquieu. You need to have three branches of government. John Locke had actually written about that a little bit earlier, but he dove a little deeper. He talked about the judicial, the executive, the legislative. And he talked about that had enormous influence on the framers of our government. But when you go a little bit later into a deeper chapter in the book, it's even more revealing. Not the only one, but the most prominent and the most profound way in which he explained it. The issue of power. Power. I'm actually playing around with this issue right now, just so you know. The issue of power. Power can be used for good. It can be used for devastation. Power in the hands of egomaniacs, power in the hands of people who are power hungry, power in the hands of evil people can be genocidal. And yet you need power to create the United States of America. You need power to take care of your family and so forth. So I don't want to get too philosophical. But for governmental purposes, power needs to balance power. We've talked a little bit about this before, but right now it's important because it's all teed up with this election. So there are provisions in this Constitution that underscore the notion that power needs to check power. In fact, your entire Constitution, if you go through it again, is all about power checking power. The whole thing. The whole thing. Why do you need three branches of government? Separation of what? Power. Separation of power. The legislative. Elected. In our country. The judiciary. We have a judiciary like nobody ever saw before. Independent. Lifetime appointments. And an executive like nobody's ever seen before. A president and a vice president. What else do you see? They're elected differently. They're chosen differently. The Senate was originally chosen by the state legislature, so they would have a say. Now they're elected directly as a result of the 17th Amendment. I'm not a fan, but you know, with all the populism going on the left and the right, I would be shouted down. So that's irrelevant too. The point is, the Senate, two from each state. The House is the only, or was originally, the only directly elected body in the entire federal government. Why? They didn't support democracy. They supported republicanism. Because democracy means factions can take over, or a majority can be tyrannical. We've seen that in history. They saw it. They didn't want anything to do with it. They wanted republicanism. They wanted checks and power. There were certain principles, certain belief systems in the Declaration of Independence that need to be enshrined in our constitutional system. You can't have people vote away your rights. Look at the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. They're your Bill of Rights. Nobody gets to vote them out. I don't care how many people vote. If it's 90% of them don't think you should have the right to bear arms, that's too damn bad. They don't get a say in what you get, whether you have a right to bear arms and defend yourself and so forth and so on. The view of the framers, because they were geniuses. And they had all this experience through tyranny. What else? You choose a president, not through a direct election, an electoral college. Why? They created this presidency out of whole cloth. The head, one person is the head of an entire branch. We can't just leave it up to a popular vote. Why? That means, they said back, the cities will choose the president. What about our agricultural colonies back then, the states? What about them? Don't they have a say too? What about Rhode Island? What, only the big states? Virginia, New York, Massachusetts, they get a say? Rhode Island gets no say? Delaware, the first state, they get no say? So in order to have a union and in order to make sure every aspect of the society was represented, they came up with this brilliant electoral college. It had nothing to do with slavery. And so each state has the majority gets to choose the electors who meet to choose the president. So if you have a majority in Delaware, they meet and assign the electors to whomever got the majority vote. New York, same thing. But New York doesn't get to drown out Delaware's decisions. New York doesn't get to drown out Rhode Island's decisions, and so forth and so on. Today, California doesn't get to drown out Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and all those other. And if you had a national popular vote, that's what they would do. So they were thinking. And in 5.5 months' time, they came up with this. Now, truth be told, Madison and some of the others, Sherman and so forth, they were working on it, thinking about it beforehand. But when they all got together, power, the Electoral College is crucial. An independent Supreme Court. Remember, 3 branches are crucial. A president chosen by the people through the Electoral College, but not chosen by the legislature. Unheard of. The prime minister is chosen by the parliament in Europe. They said no. He's going to be chosen separately. Staggered voting. Every 2 years in the House. Every 2 years, 1/3 of the Senate is up. 6 years term. President gets a 4-year term. Staggered. Staggered. So the accumulation of power, the centralization of government is limited. Not only do they divide Article 1, 2, 3, do they divide these powers among 3 branches, but they delineate what they can do in as much detail as they can provide, looking prospectively. They delineate. You have the power of the purse, Congress, and specifically Congress. And even there, I should mention, it's not one legislative body, it's a bicameral Congress. There's 2 legislative bodies that have to come together to pass a law. Not 1, 2. That was never heard of before. So even within Congress, because many of them were concerned about the tyranny of the legislature, because they saw the tyranny of the parliament in Europe. So they addressed that. They addressed the tyranny of a king with an elected president, with the ability to impeach, but not for just any cause. The House, it's a majority vote, but in the Senate, you need a supermajority to convict and remove. And so they discussed that and looked at that in great detail. Checks and balances. Congress can pass a law, but a president has the power to veto it. But Congress has the power to override the veto. What else? President can't appoint all his senior staff on his own. He has to run them through the Senate. The Appointments Clause. The advising consent of the United States Senate to ensure that the body politic, the president and the Senate, back then representing the state legislatures, but now representing the states, have a say. The Appointments Clause. They looked at these things. Now, there's much more, but I've laid the foundation.
For all this and much more, sign up for Levin TV.